to the candidates who responded to our invitation to come tonight. Tom Hucker is going to come a little bit later in the evening. He's kicking off his campaign with an event that's going on right now. This program is sponsored by the Tacoma Voice newspaper and by, fortunately, at least one residents association in each of the 6 wards of Takoma Park. In Ward 1, the Old Town Residents Association and the North Tacoma Citizens Association. We also have Between the Creeks Neighborhood Association, New Hampshire Garden Citizens Association, North Tacoma, the Ritchie Citizens Association, the Westmoreland Area Community Organization, and the District 20, a couple of the District 20 Democrat precincts. And, of course, the Tacoma Voice. The program this evening is going to be moderated by Tacoma Voice publisher Eric Bond. We have prepared a number of questions that Eric will pose to the candidates. He's going to lay out the ground rules for the forum. We are also inviting members of the audience to submit questions, which you should write on one of these white sheets of paper that can be found on the table over there, and you can hand them to me or to Mari Robnett, who appears to have left the room. That's okay, so you can hand them to me. I'll be sitting up in the front over here. I want to especially thank, in addition to the Tacoma Voice, Mari, who was the lead organizer for this event and put a lot of work into making it happen. So again, thank you all for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy and find very beneficial the forum. And I'll turn it over to Eric Bond, Tacoma Voice publisher, our moderator.
Thank you, Seth, and good evening and welcome to this election forum, broadcasting from beautiful downtown Takoma Park. Tonight we'll hear the views and positions of candidates for delegate in District 20 in the Maryland General Assembly. This is a 4-year position. Voters in District 20, which includes Takoma Park and Silver Spring, will choose 3 of these candidates to represent us in Annapolis. The 3 candidates who receive the most votes will be our next delegates. All of these candidates are Democrats, so they will face each other in the Democratic primary on September 12th. Thus far, no Republican candidates have registered to face the Democratic winners in November, so it is extremely likely that the 3 winners of the Democratic primary will be the next delegates, and therefore, right here tonight. Two of these candidates are incumbents. I'll allow them to introduce themselves as we proceed. Before we proceed with the program, I'd like to give a special thanks to Mari Robnett and Seth Grimes for their work organizing this forum. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Takoma Park Cable for simulcasting this event and rebroadcasting it throughout the summer so that voters in this district can make an informed choice. The schedule for the rebroadcast will be in the Takoma Voice, or you can access them online at the Takoma Park Municipal website. The format for this forum will be as follows. Each candidate will be given a chance to give a 2-minute opening statement. Following that, I will proceed with one question which all the candidates will answer, and each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to the question. They will then get 30 seconds to follow up if they see fit to clarify their position. We're going to start alphabetically with Ms. Hickson, Sheila Hickson, and we would love to hear your opening statement.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you all for being here tonight. Of any place in the district, this is the one that participates, Takoma Park participates in every meeting and everything, and it's always great to have your input and your leadership in these things. As you know, I've been in the House of Delegates. I'm chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm the first woman to hold that position, and I'm very honored to be able to do that. This session, again, we have a Republican governor, and the legislature is Democratic. It was awful. It was the worst I've ever experienced since I've been in elected office. I don't want that to happen again. I know. And so we'll certainly, I know you'll all send us a Democratic governor so we can get the job done for things that we're doing. But we did override 18 vetoes, first time in the history of the state of Maryland, and those bills passed. And the big ones for all of us were obviously the minimum wage, which frankly is pathetic when it's only $1. But we will, that's our first step to moving toward the living wage, and that will be a goal that we'll want to achieve the next time we go down. And the other one was the Walmart bill and on health care and making it, making the companies pay their share for it. And that was, for us, a landmark piece of operation. And we were thrilled, particularly with those bills. And then we went on, from my committee deals with the education bill. We protected the education formulas so that it will be funded by 2008, and there were a lot of people trying to erode that. We protected it, but we have to be ever vigilant to keep that happening. We also had the Healthy Air Act from the environmental issue. That was a good bill. It's a small step. It wasn't enough, and we have to do more, but we were pleased that we could go forward with that. And I also had the Healthy Initiative bill in that was where the tobacco tax would pay for low-income people to get health care. That did not pass the House, but Doug Duncan put it in his platform that it will be his health piece on his platform. So maybe that will give it impetus to go forward, and we'll have a little more strength down there and getting the right people down there to vote. And I know there are so many more things to do. As I said, there's a Republican governor, but for us in the legislature, it was like taking 2 steps forward and 1 back every time we tried to get something moving. And I just came back this morning at 6 o'clock in the morning from the session in Annapolis, and we think we had a good bill, and I feel that our customers in PEPCO are going to be protected. We're having a new Public Service Commission, consumer-oriented.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate to break in. Our timer usually gives a little noise, but I didn't hear it go off this time, so
Okay.
I'll have to figure out how to, gently break in. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next candidate, Tom Hucker, as was said before, is kicking off his campaign actually tonight, and we expect him to join us shortly. So we'll move alphabetically to our next candidate, Aaron Klein.
Hi, I'm Aaron Klein, and I want to thank you, Eric and Seth and Mari, and for putting this wonderful event together, and everybody here for coming out tonight to listen to all of us to make an informed decision about the 3 delegates that you'll be sending to Annapolis. It's a pleasure to be back in Takoma Park. I went to middle school just up the road at Takoma Park Middle School, and I went to the old Blair High School. And it was while I was at Blair that I got instilled with a sense of civic activism to this day. At the time, many of you here remember we were engaged in what was called the Better Blair fight, when in 1993 the county continued a policy of inequity and inequality towards this area by failing to fund our schools going forward. This community organized in a way that heretofore it hadn't, and fought a very successful battle that culminated in the victory for the funding of what today is we all share as Blair High School. That inspired into me a sense that communities can come together and make a positive change. I went off to college and graduate school and came back committed to a life of public service. I spent the last 5 years as Senator Sarbanes' chief economist in the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. I've seen Senator Sarbanes do some amazing things, and it's a shame that we're not going to have him representing us going forward. One vote that was particularly difficult for him to cast in a difficult light was when he voted against going to war in Iraq, one of only 23 Democratic senators at the time to do that. It needs applause because it was a very difficult vote. It was not the popular thing at the time, but he stood by his ideals and his knowledge of the policies, and obviously he's been proven correct on that vote. That's the type of delegate I want to be when I go down to Annapolis, if you all will send me there. I've talked about education as a key issue of mine. Transportation is another one. I was a lead Democratic staffer writing the federal transit formulas that distribute mass transit dollars throughout this country, and I have a special expertise in terms of going down and making the Purple Line a reality. We sit in traffic far too long for far too much of our day. The environment, affordable housing, there's some other issues. I look forward to talking about them with all of you throughout this night.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. And we'll move on to Lucinda Leslie.
Thank you, and I want to thank the organizers of tonight's event. I'd like to begin our discussion by introducing my qualifications and my motivation for running for the House of Delegates. My qualifications include previous experience as a policy advisor to the Maryland General Assembly. I developed the financial models that the Assembly used to manage the $3 billion transportation trust fund in the state, and I advised on the management of state debt. In fact, I wrote the book. During the 2004 session, I recommended some restrictions on Garvey bonds, which were adopted by the General Assembly, and as you may know, these are a significant component of the financing plan for the ICC. I currently handle transportation, housing, and environment policy for Congressman Elijah Cummings of Baltimore, who led the Congressional Black Caucus in opposing the Iraq War when that vote was taken. My motivation for running is very personal. Through my own experiences, including my father's extended unemployment while I was younger, I have seen that my life could have been other than it has been. Barack Obama has said that there is an empathy deficit in this nation, and I think what that means is that people do not see that things can be other than they are. They don't see that their situation is fragile because we lack sustainable social policies. They don't see that a job loss, an illness, a divorce could leave them in dire circumstances. But they also don't see that things could be better. We could work to close the achievement gap in our schools. We could provide affordable housing. We could build the Purple Line. And we can provide universal health care. So I am running to do these things. I believe that my qualifications will make me an effective delegate in Annapolis because I know the policies, I know the procedures, I know the state's budget, and my motivation will enable me to accomplish our community's priorities, our community's progressive priorities as a delegate. And I look forward to discussing both my qualifications and my motivation as we continue our dialogue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leslie. And Ms. Heather Mazur.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here in Takoma Park, my home. I had the benefit of serving the better part of the last 2 years on this dais as a member of the City Council in this community, and I hope that everyone is going to spend some time checking out today's grand opening of the lower level of the community center here. It's a real great space for bringing our community together. I'm running for the House of Delegates in large measure because many of you in the audience had encouraged me to do it after my service on the City Council. I believe strongly in good government, in economic justice, social justice, fairness for all people. I started out in politics with my dad on the picket lines. He was a member of the United Auto Workers and a welder at a factory, and we were on strike for 1.5 years straight. And I learned the courage of my convictions being on the picket line with him to fight for what you believe in. If you send me to Annapolis, I will fight for this community. We need to have policies that are fair to our families, that are good to our communities, but we need someone who is going to be in Annapolis fighting for those rights for us with a very deep understanding of what the community needs and values most. I am very thankful to have had a service not only on the City Council here, but also on a local after-school program on the Board of Directors, serving as the Latino Health Initiative Technical Director for the county. I have experience outside of Takoma Park that I think will help us deliver those values that we hold dearly in the legislature, from having run the Carrie Edwards campaign in 2004 and being elected as a Democratic National Committee woman in this state. Those opportunities have allowed me to build relationships with people all across the state that sometimes, you know, people, what they know about Takoma Park and District 20 as well, that's nuclear-free zone, and you have Roscoe the Rooster, and you have corn-burning stoves, and there are all these wonderful things that make up this community, but it's important to be able to express the deeper values of what we hold dear in communicating with our colleagues in the state legislature, and I have those relationships, and I look forward to going to work for you.
Thank you. Mr. Gareth Murray.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed an honor to return here because this is where it all began for me 4 years ago. I am the other delegate from District 20, and I thank Takoma Voice for always making an effort to get the word out to the masses, and of course Takoma Park Cable for televising this particular event. I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee in Annapolis, and I'm also the Vice Chair of the County Affairs Committee. In my first term, I can point to legislation that I sponsored or co-sponsored, as well as many votes that I made, which I think have had a significant impact on the community in which we live. This past session, I sponsored landmark legislation creating the only, well, the first Commission on Men's Health in the state of Maryland, which makes us the 5th state in the United States to have such a commission. I was lead sponsor on several bills to improve the effectiveness of nursing homes in terms of the operation and treatment of the patients there. Co-sponsored legislation to establish the Health Disparities, Office on Health Disparities for the state. Co-sponsored legislation to give more independence to those with disabilities. Matter of fact, today I was awarded the Maryland Association of Community Services for Persons with Developmental Disabilities Legislator of the Year award. I co-sponsored and lobbied for the Medical Decision-Making Act. As far as community life and equal rights is concerned, co-sponsored the Hate Crimes Penalties Act, co-sponsored minimum wage. Also, we attempted to get the living wage through. Co-sponsored the Four Pollutants Bill. Co-sponsored Fair Share Health Care Bill, which you call the Walmart Bill. Extended voting legislation. And I'll tell you more later.
Always let you finish your clause, you know, don't mean to.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Nixon?
Hello, everyone. My name is Diane Nixon. Many of you know me. I ran 4 years ago, and I came 569 votes behind Delegate Murray, and I'm hoping this year with Delegate Francho not running that I will be elected. Just a little bit of background. I was elected twice from this district to serve on the Democratic Central Committee. I am a union member of SEIU, and I have been for many years. I work at Georgetown Hospital, but I also work in Annapolis during the legislative session as a political consultant, and the issues that I've worked on primarily have been for habitat protection and for animal protection. I worked with the Humane Society of the U.S. and various humane organizations across the state. Some of you may know my husband, who's sitting here with the camera, Clyde LaSalle. He is a photographer for the city of Takoma Park and has worked for years with the Takoma Park newsletter. Issues, I have a variety of issues that I really care about, and I'm just going to give you a couple of them. Healthcare is an important issue to me as a healthcare worker, and with a degree as a medical technologist. I think we're way behind in healthcare in Montgomery County. We need to have easier access for cheaper prescription medications. The cost of prescription drugs is outrageous, and we need to be able to subsidize that or get that down and get that under control. We also need oversight for hospitals. We need a committee to go into hospitals and to evaluate them and get them to do the right thing for the patients. And this also includes nursing homes, which are often in very poor disrepair and don't serve the community well.
Thank you.
Boy, that one quick. Okay.
2 minutes is not long. And I almost hate to keep you to 1 minute on these responses, but that gives us the opportunity to cover more ground, which I think.
I'll get it in the 1 minute then.
I think we'll start with you, Ms. Nixon, with the next question, and we kind of come back around. I'm going to start with a fairly open question. All of you have positions on a variety of issues that we'll be covering tonight. But I think to start off, I'd like to hear what you feel is the biggest challenge facing this district and what your plan is for addressing that challenge.
Well, the issue that I hear most often is about the Purple Line. I think we need to go ahead with that, and we need transportation that is low cost and that consumers can use. Until we get a good system for transportation, which to me would include the Purple Line, we're going to have more and more cars on the road. I'd like to also encourage people to bicycle. I think that's a good alternative to using a car. And I think transportation is a very big issue. I do want to say that I've always opposed the ICC. although I'm not sure if anything can be done at this point to stop it. If there's anything that can be done to stop it, I want to be a part of that.
Thank you. Mr. Murray, what do you see as the biggest challenge for this district?
That's a difficult question. Although I think transportation is a big problem, and I've been in favor of the Purple Line forever, but I think without affordable housing, if folks do not have affordable housing, it doesn't matter whether or not we have the Purple Line because they won't be able to afford to live here. This past session, we attempted to push a bill through that would stop the conversion of the apartment buildings or make it much more difficult to convert apartment buildings to condominiums. Right now, and I've heard from one, and I see her here, one constituent who's concerned about the taxes on their homes for seniors. And I've heard it from several individuals who are being forced out of their homes because they can't afford the property taxes. So I think affordable housing is an issue that affects all of us, from those who are still working to those who have retired, and we have to do something to take care of that.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
Education is my top policy priority, and I'm proud to be endorsed by both the Teachers Union as well as the support service workers at SEIU Local 500 that support our schools. But in order to get the funding to have quality pensions for our teachers and have the funding that we need for our schools and have quality after-school programs, we need to be able to target the resources we need. And so I think a top priority to go to Annapolis is to shake things up about getting real about our income tax system. We basically have a regressive flat tax in this state. After you've paid taxes on roughly your first $3,500 of income, millionaires are paying the same tax rate as minimum wage earners. And we need to make the tax code more progressive in order to have those with more pay more, in order to provide relief to those in the middle and lower incomes, in order to have the resources left over to pay for the programs that so many of us in this room and at this dais consider very important for our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
I've heard the previous speakers talk about the Purple Line, affordable housing, environmental preservation. All of those are priorities for me, but I think that they must be looked at comprehensively. So my top priority is changing the way we manage growth and development. In our state, we have competing tensions between local control and ambitious environmental preservation goals. And we have left it to counties, by and large, to implement, for example, the 1992 Planning Act, the Critical Areas Act, and our smart growth laws. I think we need to look at development from a more regional perspective, even a statewide perspective, and unless we stop sprawl, unless we increase affordable housing and concentrate it around transit centers, we will not be able to accomplish a lot of these other objectives that we have. So my top priority will be strengthening the smart growth laws and establishing a mechanism to manage growth on a more longer-term, wider, comprehensive perspective.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
Well, I'm somewhat reminded of the line that all the things that have been said, but all the people that need to say them have yet to speak. My top priority is education, and specifically school construction. There's 17,000 students in portable classrooms today in Montgomery County. My nephew is in the 3rd grade at Sligo Creek Elementary School. I'm afraid he's going to end up in the same portable classrooms that were there when I was there at Blair. We need to get adequate school facility funding out of Annapolis, where the study said $400 million, and I think there was a huge increase from about 125 to 200, but we're only halfway there. We need to make sure when it comes out through Montgomery County that it comes back into this community. As some of my other candidates out here have talked about smart growth, we need to practice smart growth. And the question, I think, is often not what are your positions, but what skills do you have to make them happen? As the lead Senate staffer working on the nation's federal transit law, I was helping write the competitive grant process that the Purple Line will go through.
Thank you.
And so you need to have special skills to make that happen, and I can deliver.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I agree with everything that's been said. Education for me is too. Just a quick few comments. Montgomery County got $40 million this year for the schools in Takoma Park. Montgomery College got $11.8 million. So we are trying to get our share. We're watchdogs on that. We did a poll, and the number one issue in District 20 was transportation, was the biggest concern of the people. And 78% of the people want the Purple Line. So you know that we're going to support the Purple Line and do everything we can. And the only thing that I can say for the Ehrlich administration is they didn't take it off their list of things to do. It's still in the top 5 priorities for the state of Maryland. So we haven't lost the focus. Anyway, it's still there, and we'll continue to take care of that. And I would like to go back and make sure that the Purple Line happens. That's very important to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Tom Hucker has joined us, and I think that we can work this in fairly seamlessly. The first question was, what do you see as the biggest challenge for this district, that this district faces, and what are your plans for addressing it? And I'll give you a little bit more time so you can also give a little bit of a opening statement about yourself. So we'll give you 3 minutes to deal with all of that.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks to all of you for being here. My name is Tom Hucker. I'm very sorry to be late. As Eric may have mentioned, my campaign kickoff was previously scheduled for tonight, so when the debate got moved, I had a conflict and couldn't, once the mailing had gone out, couldn't move the kickoff. But it was a fantastic event. My head's swimming, and I hope to be, moderately lucid tonight. Annapolis is a very difficult place to get anything done. The system is set up that way despite everyone's best intentions. Most good and popular bills die year after year. But, and Sheila, I think, will be my witness to that. But as the Director of Progressive Maryland, I've been working for 4 years in Annapolis. And I've worked with many of you, I can see in the audience, and with unions and civil rights groups and environmental groups to get very difficult bills actually enacted into law over year after year. We've raised wages for almost 200,000 hard workers and their families by raising the minimum wage, and we've lifted thousands of people out of poverty by passing local living wage laws. We've closed corporate loopholes with Sheila's leadership to raise revenue, almost $1 billion over the next 10 years for our schools and our health care and our transportation, and we've expanded health care coverage to thousands of people by finally forcing the biggest company in our state, Walmart, to provide health care for its underpaid workers. And for years, the exact same bills died. Stu Bainham used to be the senator for this district. He used to sponsor the loopholes bill, and it died year after year, not because of any lack of talent on his part. But now we have an organization that was able to get those bills passed. Annapolis takes a long time to figure out. It takes a long time to develop those relationships. And it's a privilege to be down there as a public interest advocate. You are in a position that no individual delegate's in, because you can develop deep relationships, trusting relationships with most of the House of Delegates and most of the senators, and that's your job. I think the biggest challenge for this district, we're sending our first new delegate there into a clean, open seat. The last election was sort of an odd one, given the judge's decision throwing out the districts. Garrett's been doing a great job for 4 years. But we're sending somebody into an open seat, and I think the challenge for this district is to send somebody that knows the ropes, that has the experience and the relationships to get hard bills to pass out of Annapolis, because the fact is most freshman delegates get very little done for a long, long time. They're isolated from other delegates outside their committees. They're certainly isolated from the senators. I won't fall into that trap. I'll avoid the freshman jinx and be able to pass difficult bills to benefit Takoma Park and Silver Spring, as I have been for years. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hucker. Now, according to the program we set up, we are allowing a 30-second follow-up for any candidate who cares. I am ready to move on to the next question, but if there's anybody here who would like to follow up on that first rather softball question, feel free. Okay. So Why don't we go to Ms. Hickson for the next one, and I will actually try to stagger who we go to first. But we have a question from a community member that reads, Maryland law favors counties over cities when it comes to raising revenues. For example, limiting cities to a 17% share of locally allocated state income taxes paid by the residents. The other 83% goes to the county of residence. What will you do to level the playing field for Takoma Park and other Maryland municipalities?
Thank you. We have tried to work very closely with the Municipal League on getting that done. There's been a big fight in Annapolis between the Municipal League and the MACO, the county operation. It's a fight that the counties don't want to give up any of the resources that the Municipal League has. We have supported, and I've been on record of supporting Municipal League's request to have more money. We haven't been able to win on that, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stop. But you can imagine the clout the Montgomery County and the Big Seven have in Annapolis over the municipalities, and that excludes Baltimore City. Baltimore City is considered a county at that level, so they're with the Big Seven. And all the other little municipalities are fighting them to get a fair share of that percentage. The bill was in. We will be working on it, and we are going to make sure that, trying to make sure that it happens. We edge up a little. We got a percentage from them. We didn't get enough.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker, what is your plan to help level the playing field for Takoma Park, bringing more of our money to our city?
I could use a little bit of an education, I'll tell you, by some of the local residents that have been struggling with this issue for years. But yes, I'm eager to use the relationships I have to get real equity for Takoma Park. I know, the Takoma residents are taxed even more than the city of Chevy Chase, that the rebate you get from the state goes through the county and puts the municipality at a tilted playing field, and I'd certainly support efforts to have the state money go back directly to the municipalities and not necessarily through the county, so we could have a level playing field to get Takoma Park's fair share of resources.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Klein?
I've talked about the rebate issue with many of you. It's a wonderful experience running for office, how much you learn by listening, knocking on doors, and talking to some of the educated and involved leaders in this community. Takoma Park is getting ripped off in a lot of ways compared to the same rebates through the county that Chevy Chase and Somerset and other incorporated municipalities get. It's not new. I call it the two Montgomerys. They have their Montgomery over in Bethesda and Chevy Chase and Potomac, and we have our Montgomery in Takoma Park and Silver Spring. The rebate is one example. Other infrastructure spending in terms of schools, roads, mass transit, or all others. This is a central core issue to me. It's been central to my experience growing up in the county and living here. I'm going to be a strong advocate, as I have been for my whole life, down to Annapolis for Takoma Park and Silver Spring. And I'll add on the fact that as an economist and having worked as a professional staffer on the Senate Banking Committee, I'm very knowledgeable about formulas, how to manipulate and work numbers so that they can come to our advantage.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
Thank you. Well, bringing this back to Annapolis, I actually worked in Annapolis, so I know the numbers there, and I know how to manipulate the numbers that are most relevant to Takoma Park. I think we need to take a comprehensive look at our taxation system in the state. Heather made reference to the fact that our income tax is not progressive. Income tax is the top source of income, or top source of revenue to the state. The second source is the motor fuel tax. The third source is the lottery, and the fourth source is the corporate income tax. And I think we need to change that. I think we also need to look at the over-reliance on the property tax for revenues to the counties. When in the late 1990s, the General Assembly changed the tax level of the income tax. They reduced the top level from 5% to 4.75% without making it more progressive, thereby foregoing $700 million in revenue by this point. So I think we need to go back and revisit that entire structure, thereby generating more revenue for the state to accomplish all of our priorities, including providing more revenue for Takoma Park.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
As a member of the City Council, I worked with, I know I've seen Mayor Porter and Councilmember Siemens and Councilwoman Joy Austin Lane here. We've fought really hard for making sure that Takoma Park gets its fair share of resources. We helped set up the Tax and Services Duplication Issues Committee, and many of you in this room gave countless hours of work in producing an amazing report, and if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to download it from the city's website. It lays out a really great roadmap on where we need to go to continue to level the playing field. We've already continued to have successes in advocating on the police rebates. There are more areas in which we have to continue this pressing fight. It's crucial that we win on this. People in Takoma Park are getting to the point where they can't afford to live in their own homes anymore. Seniors on fixed incomes that can't afford the tax rates anymore. Artists and nonprofits, people who work at nonprofits and make middle-income wages in this community are being driven out by the lack of ability to get this right. And with the knowledge I have from living in this community and serving on the council, I'll continue to fight for you.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
I think that Delegate Hickson spoke about legislation that we've attempted to push through. Tom also talked about relationships. And I think that one of the things that has to happen is that we have to reach back and look back and connect with Takoma Park. It's one thing to go to Annapolis and to enact legislation. It's another thing to do it in a vacuum. I think we have to work more closely with Mayor Porter and with the City Council members to stimulate more ideas. I'm a Fleming Fellow with the Center for Policy Alternatives. We don't know everything, even though it's a progressive legislators organization. And I think what's critical is that we have to work more closely, just as we did with the Affordable Housing Bill. Even though it didn't get through, I think that we were able to make more progress by working together. And so my way of approaching the issue would be to work more closely with Takoma Park, with the leadership here, to push forward legislation that makes sense for Takoma Park.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon?
I think that the citizens that live in Takoma Park are overtaxed. I live one block outside of Takoma Park in Silver Spring, right behind Carroll Avenue, and I pay less taxes on my for my living than you all do, and I don't think it's fair. You all have your own police department, your own fire department, your own library. You have high standards, and I think every single penny should come back to Takoma Park for other services, not to go into a general pool when you're paying twice for what other people only pay once for.
Thank you.
If I might add something, if you had said that it would be all right to make a comment, that we passed a bill in the General Assembly to redo the tax structure. We're having a commission that's set up, and that will start in January and go for 1 year. That's income tax, gas tax, it's all the taxes, corporate taxes, everything that we deal with in the local municipality. That'll go into effect and will be started by the next new Democratic governor, I hope, for sure. And the other bill that passed, that, as a number of the people up here have mentioned, is the senior citizens. We did do a property tax credit for them that they don't have to pay their property tax if they qualify on salary and age. And there are forms, and in fact, we just were notified, the elected official was just notified today that the forms will be going out to the people. So that's one small step to help.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to follow up on that first question? Okay. Well, we will move to another question from the audience. And let's start with Mr. Aaron this time. Do you unequivocally support gay marriage for state of Maryland?
Absolutely. I'll be very clear and brief. My mom picketed Woolworth lunch counter, which was segregated right here in the 1960s. I view that as I'm immensely proud of her. I view this as a civil rights issue, and I think if you look at that from that same premise, You have to come to the same conclusion of full equality for everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
Yes, I absolutely unequivocally support gay marriage. An interesting fact, and this I take very, very personally. My husband is from India. From about 1661 or 64, I've seen different dates, until the late 1950s, interracial marriage, miscegenation, was banned in this state. And it was finally overturned in the United States in the 1967 Loving case, and we just celebrated the anniversary of that. Ironically, in 1973, Maryland decided that, I guess after 6 years of marriage freedom, they would limit marriage again to define it as being between a man and a woman. And I certainly hope it doesn't take us hundreds of years to realize the ignorance of that decision.
Yeah. Ms. Mazur?
My partner Deborah and I were married last August on the western shores of the Chesapeake Bay, and we did it in Maryland. We did it in Maryland to take a stand for what we were going to fight for in terms of our rights here in this state. And I was extremely perplexed by members of my own party who the ink wasn't even dry on Judge Murdoch's decision at the Baltimore Circuit Court before they were encouraging conservatives in the state to move forward with efforts to block higher court decisions to allow Maryland to move forward in the example of Massachusetts in giving full marriage rights and equality to people in our state. I wrote a hard-hitting editorial taking on members of my own party for their lack of courage in taking a stand on an issue that's the time has come. This is a civil rights issue, and we can't equivocate on it.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
Thank you. Some of you may know that I am a minister. And I guess the easiest thing to do would be to say, yes, I unequivocally support gay marriage, but I'm about rights. As you heard my colleague say, she was married to her partner, but she has no rights. A religious ceremony is not where the rights are. And that's the misinformation that's been laid on us. All of the rights are attached to the civil side of the house. And I think it's a human rights issue because you cannot deny individuals the right to enter into a contract, because that's what it is. And so just as Cardinal McKissick said, civil unions are something that we need for everyone in this country to bring about equality as far as the relationship is concerned. Marriage is something that's a personal issue as far as I'm concerned. That's a religious issue. I'll come back to it for 30 seconds.
Ms. Nixon?
Yes, I do support gay marriage, and I would be willing to put my name on any piece of legislation that supported gay marriage in Annapolis. I also support Maryland recognizing gay marriages from other states, and I support gay adoption.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson?
Yes, I was the original sponsor for the gay rights bill. It took us 7 years to get that passed in the state of Maryland. Very painful, and but we finally did it. But we did it with the courage of the people in this room and people who are willing to stand up. And yes, I support a marriage between couples, and I've signed on all the bills, worked hard to try to get them passed. But as you know, Maryland is like two pieces of two states. We have one who are well-meaning, and then we have one who really want to do the right thing. And the conservatives surround us, so we have to keep an eye on them at every moment. Okay? Thank you.
Amen, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I absolutely support marriage equality. I've worked closely with Equality Maryland. Their executive director, Dan Formansky, sits on Progressive Maryland's board and was just at my kickoff. We worked closely together to keep the anti-gay marriage amendment off the ballot this fall. The Speaker, Mike Bush, went to heroic lengths to and use every parliamentary trick to keep that off the ballot, and a coalition of us worked very hard to do that. But I fully support marriage equality, and I look forward to moving the state forward in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Rucker. Would any candidate like to follow up?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we'll start with Ms. Mazur.
I think it's important not just to be for it ourselves, but how can we get others to be for it also so that we can actually make progress and win? And as Delegate Hickson said, we do have different parts of the state that aren't like District 20. I've been working with a group of national GLBT advocates and donors to raise a special pot of money that we can use to support Democrats on the edge on this issue in their reelection bid in this state, this go-around, and have them know in no uncertain terms that it was the GLBT community that helped elect them based on their willingness to work with us on advancing this effort forward.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
Just to clarify one thing, today, straight couples and gay couples that have a religious ceremony performed end up with the exact same number of rights, which is none. And that's why I think we have to do a tremendous effort in terms of educating the community to let folks know where the rights are as far as the law is concerned. When we talk about individuals coming together, committed couples, as Heather and her partner are. But we have to understand and educate the community. I've been working along with Equality Maryland to try to educate the religious community so that they understand what is actually going on here. Because, folks, we are being given, as they say, we've been taken down the road the wrong way. We need to understand what the laws are and that all of the rights are attached to the civil union side of the House.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And would anyone else care to follow up? Or? Okay. We'll turn to Ms. Leslie. In the failure of federal action to provide universal health coverage, some states are stepping up and pressing for their own comprehensive reforms. What would you support or propose for Maryland to do to improve health care concerns?
Well, I would support any measure that provides universal care. I think universal health care is an absolute right, and it's inexcusable that in the richest nation in America and the third richest state in that nation, we have 700,000 people without health coverage today. I think we could look at the Massachusetts provisions, which are basically requiring people to buy insurance and setting up state programs to subsidize insurance for those who cannot afford it. I would even be willing to look at a single-payer system. It's going to take a lot of effort to get the state to that point, but it's just going to take making it a priority because we have the resources, and frankly, this is a progressive state, and if Massachusetts can do it, we can do it.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
I had the opportunity to work with Senator Kerry in drafting his health reform plan in the 2004 presidential campaign. And on my website, which is heathermazier.com, you can find detailed policy papers for this race. On the health care paper, I've taken what I worked on at a national level and scaled it down to what I think can work well in Maryland, building on many of those same ideas. We've got to expand access, improve quality, reduce costs, and continue to invest in public health. We expand access in part, I mean, it's a mark of shame on this great state that we have 780,000 people with no health insurance whatsoever. Many of them children, many of them low-income pregnant women who are legal immigrants, but the state has decided to cut back funding for these families. We need to restore that funding. We need to expand coverage options for children fresh out of college who don't have access to their health care from their parents anymore, don't get it in the job that they're being offered. We can expand and build on the state child health insurance program, the Medicaid program, to provide them coverage. And I'll come back and talk about a couple other ideas.
Great, thanks. Mr. Murray?
I serve on the Health and Government Operations Committee, and we deal with health care. One of the bills that we attempted to push through this year, which did not even make it out of committee, involved charging individuals a fee who chose not to have health insurance. In the state of Maryland, and you have to understand, we have the premier health care system as far as the nation is concerned. Folks come from all over the place to look at our trauma network. Maryland will not turn an individual away from a hospital. All of our hospitals here are open to anyone. Whether or not they have insurance, when they show up in the emergency room, they must be treated. And so we do have a good health care system as far as states are concerned. As far as health insurance is concerned, we still have a long ways to go. There are certain areas that we've attempted to have an impact on that to make health insurance more affordable. When you look at the amount of money, the money that the execs make, and I'll come back for 30 more.
A minute goes by quickly.
It does.
Ms. Nixon?
I support universal health care. The costs of hospitals, doctors, and pharmaceuticals are going up every year. It's gotten to the point of being almost unaffordable. And yet, employers are cutting the benefits to employees and making them pay a lot of their own health insurance or taking away health insurance. Employers have to be given incentives to give better health care coverage and full pharmaceutical coverage to their employees. Insurance companies have got to stop limiting what they'll pay out. HMOs right now pick and choose what benefits they want to give. And we need to have a comprehensive plan for HMOs to give better coverage. I think pharmaceuticals should be subsidized, and the profits that pharmaceutical companies are reaping in need to go back to consumers. In Montgomery County right now, Montgomery County government, can I just finish the sentence?
Finish your sentence.
Montgomery County government has passed legislation to get pharmaceuticals from Canada. We need that for all of the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson?
I support the universal health care plan, too. And as I mentioned briefly about the bill that I had in on the health care initiative that Vinnie DeMarco is the mastermind behind. He's a great guy and did a great job on it. But it was using the tobacco tax to fund the women and children and for poverty-level people on making sure that they had health coverage and they could step up. We couldn't get it out of the committee. I'm sure it's not Delegate Murray's fault, but we couldn't get it out of there. But we're going to be back again with it. And I know it's a tax, but all of the things that we've talked to people about, raising the tobacco tax doesn't seem to be a problem with anyone. So that's the tax we can do, and no one's mad at us. So we'll be back again to do that. And on the immigrant, just a quick comment that on Ehrlich's denying the rights of Victor Ramirez's bill, we did, I think, embarrass them into having to take action and put them back on the rolls. So they are getting coverage.
Mr. Hucker?
I fully support universal health care. Probably not a shock to anyone. I made it one of the cornerstones of the remarks I just gave. One thing, we have to make sure that we're not going backwards. In 2003, Care First, the provider of last resort for health care in Maryland, decided that it would be a good idea to, if we allowed them to convert to a for-profit, even though they've been a highly subsidized nonprofit for years, and they wanted to be sold to a predatory for-profit HMO from California. The legislature did a great job of keeping Care First here as a nonprofit and keeping it controlled by board members from Maryland, and that kept it in D.C. as well. That legislation, I believe, is due to expire in 2007. We have to make sure we keep Care First here, or we're going to be throwing all kinds of people off the rolls and raising the premiums for the rest of us. Walmart's a $209 billion company that fought very hard last year to make sure we didn't force them to provide health insurance for their underpaid employees. But we did, and we overrode the governor. And it's still hung up in court, and we're going to win in court. We need to build on that bill to make sure all the large companies that aren't paying their fair share of health insurance need to do that now that we've had that success. Thank you, Eric.
Mr. Klein?
I think that we have a serious problem, and the premise of our healthcare system is totally flawed. We have America as a country, you've heard the Maryland statistics, but nationally we spend twice the percentage of our GDP on healthcare as all the rest of the developed countries in the world, and we have equal, if not worse, results in terms of life expectancy, infant mortality, access to preventive healthcare. one thing nobody's talked about here, Maryland has a higher teen pregnancy rate than Kentucky and Oklahoma. We have serious problems with the way our system is. It was I think we need fundamental reform. It was structured on the concept that working was a ticket to health care, jobs and health care. Put the onus on the employer, where most businesses are not health care businesses, and on the person that their health care was related to whether or not they had a job and what kind of job they had. That worked in a system in the 1950s where you could reasonably expect to get one job. Hopefully it would be a good job with benefits that would carry you through your working career. In today's labor force, in today's economy, we need a new system. If I could just use my 30 seconds to follow up on this, because it's a critical point, and I think what we really need is we need change. We need a new progressive leadership and a new vision here in Maryland. I'm excited to leave the U.S. Senate because nothing good is coming out of Washington or Congress until at least 2008, if not beyond that. Change needs to start in Maryland. Massachusetts has provided one model. We should be a national leader in this because we do have Hopkins and we do have NIH and we have some of the best health care providers. The problem is how it's financed and accessed for working people.
Wow, perfect timing. Okay. Ms. Leslie, would you like to follow up?
Yes, thank you. We've all spoken about the grand vision for universal health care, and that's essential. I just want to make one point, and that is statistics show that when women are diagnosed with breast cancer, those who have insurance survive longer than those who don't. It's a simple fact. So as we work toward universal care, I think one thing is very critical, and that is we need to provide catastrophic care for people who get ill. There's no excuse for fear of bankruptcy or fear of losing your house to keep somebody from getting the care that they need, and that will be an immediate priority I will have when I get there as we work toward the goal of universal care.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
We have to be working for more than just coverage for the uninsured. As I mentioned earlier, we also have to reduce costs for people who already have insurance and fear becoming uninsured. We have 50% of all bankruptcies in this country are based on medical bills that people can't pay and that their insurance won't cover for them. Premiums are rising faster than inflation. Employers are shifting more of the cost burden on individuals. We can attack this through drug pricing competition by having a fixed growth rate on premiums and a reinsurance plan, which I don't have time in 30 seconds to explain, but I would encourage you to go to my website where you can find the details. And also I lay out a vision on how to make sure that we address quality concerns so that 98,000 medical deaths per year are addressed as well.
Thank you.
I wish it were easy to come up with a quick fix. Yes, universal health care sounds good. It's something that we all want. However, it's not easy to get to. And I think it's a situation where we have to look at the entire picture. If you look at individuals, and there have been studies done where individuals with the exact same health insurance plan, making the exact same amount of money, go into a hospital, and yet the individual who is from a black or brown community gets different treatment as the individual from the majority community. So you still have health disparities, even with health insurance. So there's a greater picture that we have to pay attention to so that we can provide services for everyone.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I already said I'm for universal health care, but I do think that hospitals and nursing homes have to come under a government watch. Right now, when hospitals are inspected, and I don't know if I said I work at Georgetown Hospital, we know months in advance when that inspection is going to take place. Hospitals need to have inspections that they don't know about. And I think the quality of health care needs to be much, much better. I'm proud to work at Georgetown Hospital. It's a great hospital, but it's not in Maryland.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson, would you like to follow up?
No, I just that when you're listening to what everybody is saying, again, we always hate to raise the ugly it's the cost. It's money and where we have to get our priorities set. And so healthcare is competing with education, with everything else that we're doing. And that's the thing we confront in Annapolis at all times. Certainly don't want to cut it. I don't know how much more we can get for it.
Mr. Hucker?
I think Sheila is right. The cost is always the concern. I certainly support the tobacco tax. I'd support bulk purchasing of prescription drugs. I think we ought to be telling state contractors they can't contract with the state unless they provide health insurance. We should be telling them they should pay a living wage. We should be telling them they should provide health insurance. I don't know why we use our tax dollars to create more uninsured people in Maryland. It's their responsibility. If they don't want to do that, don't ask for our tax dollars.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As you were answering those questions, more healthcare questions came in. In fact, if anybody can see my desk here, you can see the questions keep pouring in. So there's no way we'll get to all of these. We may return to healthcare a little later. We may not have the time. We'll see how the time goes. Today, Al Gore was in Silver Spring promoting or speaking about his film An Inconvenient Truth, where he addresses global warming as a phenomenon and issue for the United States. And my question to you is, what kind of a leader will you be to be decisive, to decisively and quickly address the threat of climate change? And we'll start with you, Ms. Mazur.
I'm very proud to be a strong environmentalist, and there are a variety of issues that I think we need to address. First is alternative energy sources. Maryland should be a leader in this, and we're barely on the radar screen. Right now, we have a requirement to have 1% of our alternative energy sources on the books by 2006, moving up to 7.5% by 2019. That pales in comparison to many states along the Mid-Atlantic region. We should be accelerating our renewable portfolio standards as a way to start getting at the issue of climate change. Here in the city of Takoma Park, on the city council, I was proud to support a wind energy tax credits program and actually advocated and would support at the state level the ability of the cities and municipalities to be able to aggregate electricity purchases as a way to bring down cost of electricity. On a whole other range of environmental concerns, we need to continue to fight to clean the bay. That's going to be a partnership between the environmental community and the agricultural community to implement the tributary strategies. Boy, a minute goes by fast.
Well, we could spend a couple hours on each one of these issues.
Yes, we could.
Mr. Murray?
Yes. This past session, we passed the Four Pollutants Bill, which is a start, at least, to cleaning up our act here in the state of Maryland. And I think sometimes you have to make a tough vote when you hear people bring doom and gloom. Oh, if you make us spend more money, then it's going to cost more to produce power for the state. But you have to make a tough vote and take a stand on what's best for the community. I think we also have to start to look at our farmlands here, especially here on the Eastern Shore, where we can use those farmlands to start producing other types of energy. Wind energy up in the western part of the state is something that we could definitely get into with wind farms. But we have to be willing to do that, and we need a progressive thinking governor in order to do that, if you get my drift. I think Takoma Park has led the way with alternatives, and I think when we look at the use of electric vehicles, and I'll come back for 30 seconds later.
Ms. Nixon?
Well, if we had more public transportation that was more affordable and gave tax incentives for fuel-efficient cars, that would help with global warming. I've always considered myself to be an environmentalist, and I've worked on legislation to protect the environment and to protect habitat. I think what we're doing on the Eastern Shore with dumping chicken manure into the Chesapeake Bay is one of the biggest problems that we have. The Chesapeake Bay is dying, and until we stop over-dredging, overfishing, and dumping farm waste into the bay, the environment in that area is going to go from bad to worse. I do, and I may have to follow up on this because of my 1 minute, but I do have a question in my mind about expanding wind resources. Right now it's known that the windmills in some of the states where they are, finish my sentence.
Finish your sentence.
In some of the states where they are, have contributed to the death of countless numbers of birds and bats. that seem to be attracted by the windmills, and I think that that's something that we need to look at before we have huge numbers of windmills killing birds in Maryland.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson?
Yes, this year, and I'm sure you'll all pleased to hear this, we didn't raise any taxes. So, but what we did do for wind energy is give them tax credits for companies that are building it, and it's going ahead in Western Maryland, and they're really stepping up, and we think that that's an exciting new piece of the energy community coming into the state, and we would like to encourage that in different areas, but they are doing it up there now, and it's a program we're going to watch closely and further that program. I do have a 100% environmental voting record, and they're endorsing me this time around and again. But we have to, the kudos go to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. They're the watchdogs of the environment in the state of Maryland. So when they're asking us to do something, certainly I say yes, and the people, and they are the leaders, and nationally, all their programs and all their plans have been copied and used across the United States.
Thank you.
So we should be very proud of them.
Mr. Hucker.
Many of you know me from my work at Progressive Maryland, but before that, for 10 years, I made a lot of financial sacrifices by working in the professional environmental movement for 10 years with the PIRGs, Mary PIRG and US PIRG, and with the Sierra Club. And I'm glad my friend Bob Bingaman's in the audience, the National Field Director, is supporting me. We worked hard this year to pass the Healthy Air Act. It was a compromise. We need to go farther, but it's a big step in the right direction. The state needs to go farther to enforce higher CAFE standards for its fleet of vehicles. We need to make sure the state is purchasing hybrid vehicles and high mile per gallon vehicles and nothing else. We need to be creating good, sustainable jobs through some of the approaches the Apollo project is doing. We need to be investing more in sustainable energy. As Sheila mentioned, what's happening with wind farms in Western Maryland, we need to be encouraging them and not putting up barriers. And I'm very happy that in the work that we've done to lower the utility rates recently in the bill that just came out of the General Assembly, that we pushed to insert conservation measures and make sure they're conserving energy, not just spending it.
Mr. Klein.
Well, I agree with what many of my colleagues have said here. I like to think of I consider myself an environmentalist. I'm a member of Friends of Sligo Creek here in our community. I think globally and act locally. There's a lot. Takoma Park really exemplifies local environmentalism to its core, and we need to bring that spirit out throughout the state. I think there are a few additional things. The state needs to start with its own resources. Pennsylvania has a great green building code for their state buildings. We should be up to their standards for all of our buildings so we can be conserving energy within Maryland. One other point that I'd raise, because the question was about leadership. I was there in Silver Spring. I wasn't able to get into Al Gore's speech, but right afterwards, we had a local rally in support of the Purple Line, where I signed the Purple Line Pledge. Because I think fundamentally, when you look at what our community is going to look like in the long term, the only sustainable solution to dealing with some of our environmental problems is enhanced mass transit and is making the Purple Line a reality.
Ms. Leslie?
Thank you. There are a lot of points I want to make, a couple of higher level points and a couple of lower level points. Again, I come back to this issue. We need to change the way we manage growth and development. If we continue to have sprawl, we're at 50 billion vehicle miles traveled right now. It's projected we're going to go to 80 billion vehicle miles traveled by 2020. And if we don't change that paradigm, then a lot of these things aren't going to make the difference, the overall comprehensive difference. Now, I want to talk about a couple of lower level practical things that we can do. We are looking at building an ethanol plant in Baltimore, and as you know, there's a shortage, basically no ethanol on the East Coast because it can't be transported in pipelines. And we're looking at using hull-less barley as a cover crop and allowing that to be harvested. Normally cover crops aren't harvested, but using that to be harvested to fuel the ethanol plant. Another thing that we can do, we have programs right now in our community colleges to train technicians on repairing hybrid cars. That gives them a practical skill, and it creates a service environment for the new hybrids coming on the road. I think we need to expand the solar grants and, if I'll just finish, create programs in community colleges to train technicians to support solar systems. That gives them a usable skill, and it promotes the use of solar energy units in our state.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie, I can give you the first opportunity to follow up if you'd like,
Okay.
since I cut you off. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to turn back to that portion of the question that dealt with leadership, and I go back again to my practical experience in Annapolis. As a transportation policy advisor, I was a nonpartisan staff member, so my responsibility was implementing the decisions made by the Assembly. But I did recommend restrictions on Garvey bonds, which, as I mentioned, are a significant component of the financing plan for the ICC. Had I been there in a legislative capacity, I would have opposed it. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough to kill the project, but it was certainly a step to reduce the debt burden that we're taking on, and I believe the environmental impact is unacceptable.
Great. You can always finish your sentence. Ms. Mazier?
Program Open Space is another important program on the environmentalist radar screen. It serves as an automatic savings account for the environment over the last 40 years, and whenever there is land that's developed, there's money that goes into land conservation. Governor Ehrlich has used that as a piggy bank to raid for other purposes over the course of his administration, and we finally held him accountable in fully funding the program this year, but not restoring as much of the money that's been raided. I would actually sponsor legislation that had a hands-off policy. This can't be used for budget gimmickry. It should go for its intended purposes for land conservation.
Thank you. Mr. Ray, would you like to follow up?
Yes. Growing up, I remember when you could look down at the Chesapeake Bay and we could actually see the bottom of the bay in the area where we lived. You can no longer do that. I think we have to assist farmers in understanding, and then sometimes we may even have to provide resources for them to stop the runoff from their farms as far as the bay is concerned. The other thing that I think we have to do is to understand that this is not a simplistic kind of a fix-it kind of a deal.
Thank you.
You have to look at a variety of issues, including housing, because sprawl is a result of housing not being affordable in town, so folks move farther out, which then creates problems with driving and pollution.
Great.
I sort of got cut off on the windmills, and so I'm just going to add to that real quickly and say that I'm not against windmills, but I think we have to give it a good look and be sure that we can do something with windmills where they're not killing migrating birds and songbirds in the name of energy. The other thing is we need to preserve trees. With overdevelopment, every tree in sight seems to be getting cut down. They put up a community and call it Great Oaks in memory of the great oaks that used to be there. And we need to do something about that. It's going to be hotter and hotter if we have absolutely nothing covering us, such as trees.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson, would you like to follow up?
Just a quick comment on one program that's going on. One is there are tax credits for hybrid automobiles, and the University of Maryland is using them. They've got a fleet now, too, that if you've been out there with their parking lots, they only use hybrid operations, and they're trying to convert everything at the University of Maryland to go into that program. So we're trying to use them as an example for the rest of the government agencies in Maryland to do that.
Thank you. Mr. Harker.
I have no doubt everybody up here, I think, is a very smart and committed environmentalist. And I think the decision that's before you in September is who has a track record of convincing not just the pro-environment lawmakers in Montgomery County, but the more conservative Democrats from Anne Arundel County, Southern Maryland, Eastern Shore, Western Maryland, to vote for tough environmental bills. I've convinced them over and over to vote for a Walmart bill, a minimum wage bill, a living wage bill, and I can convince them to vote for strong environmental measures that aren't so popular in Western Maryland or the Eastern Shore.
Great. Thanks. Mr. Klein.
I think the key issue here is sprawl, and the issue is intelligent, smart growth. We all say it, but we haven't practiced it. We can see it throughout our community. Piggybacking on what Tom said, it's not just about effective lobbying. It's also about effective policies. I worked nationally in promoting a transit policy that elevated land use to a top-tier criteria in terms of deciding what types of transit projects are built so that you can really concentrate and get the most bang out of your buck for your investment. And we need to have intelligent policies as well as the skills politically to make that legislation a reality.
Thanks. Well, the issue of sprawl has come up many times over this question, so Let's follow up with a question regarding sprawl and green space. As you all know, ground has now been broken on the intercounty connector. Many people see the intercounty connector as a road that is that will contribute to sprawl and destroy green space. We'll start with Mr. Murray. What do you think can be done at the state level to control sprawl and prevent it from destroying green space?
I think we have to, number one, look at the resources that we have on the books. I think the governor, as you know, attempted to sell off a tremendous amount of green space. And I think we have to prevent that from happening. We also need to, as far as the ICC is concerned, even though it's supposed to be a done deal, I think we also need to enact certain legislation that will prevent the development in areas that are close to the ICC, because the ICC is not intended to be a vehicle for folks to develop more communities, but just a vehicle to get folks from one community to another without harming the environment, which I don't think is possible. But either way, I think that we have to just enact legislation that will prevent this state from tearing up more green space.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon.
The ICC cannot be done in an environmentally friendly way. Just the areas that it goes through, including wetlands and woods, is going to be destructive to the environment. I have been against the ICC for many years, and I am still against the ICC, although I'm not sure anything can be done to stop it. If I'm elected, I certainly will try to stop it. I think one thing that the state needs to do is to stop funding projects that damage the environment. We give money for these roads in areas that are environmentally sensitive. When I say we, I mean the state does. And then look back and say, gee whiz, isn't it too bad that's being built? We've got to stop it when it comes to funding it, and then it won't be built.
Thank you. Ms. Hickson?
Yes, it is, unfortunately, is a foregone conclusion that the ICC probably will be completed. But the piece on the sprawl, we're told that it will be, there won't be drop-offs. It will go from one end to the other. You will not be able to get on and off. And so therefore, the concern about building or adding stores, anything else at different intersections will not be conducive to the ICC on that issue. But as you know, it was Governor Ehrlich's #1 transportation projects, and of course the rest of the people in the state of Maryland really hate Montgomery County one more time because we took all the money for transportation for the ICC and the rest of the state didn't get their projects done. So you know how well we are liked down there when we're asking for votes. But on the sprawl issue also, we are looking at it closely at the state level. We're very much in favor, those of us who deal in that area, that building up around making downtowns little villages around the metro center. Virginia has done a good job in that. We would like to see some of that going. So we've been giving tax relief to groups who will develop those kind of operations around the metros. And we think that where you can walk to work, walk to shop, that's the way to live.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker?
Clearly, something is going to be built on the path of the ICC. I think there are more and less harmful ways to build it. And those of us who have been opposing it for years need to stay vigilant and make sure it is contained. Greg Smith has been talking for years about the ICC as the camel's nose under the tent, and what developers really want is to extend a full outer beltway that would include a second Potomac crossing and just increase more sprawl in other areas of Montgomery and Prince George's County. We should be opposing that. The state should be opposing that. And I won't want to spend state money on projects like that. We should be fully funding program open space, and we should be working with the council to increase the fees to developers to make sure infrastructure can keep pace with development.
Thank you. Mr. Aaron?
Sprawl is an absolute key issue. It doesn't just stop at the ICC. The latest plan from Governor Ehrlich and those folks is to expand the Beltway and turn it into a toll road I'm opposed to that. I'm a member of the Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. But as Democrats and as lawmakers, you can't beat something with nothing. We have to have an alternative to deal with the congestion, and that alternative has to be enhanced mass transit, the Purple Line, increased buses, and also walkable communities. As the chief economist on the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, I have a lot of experience looking at what has been national role models and what have been successes and failures. We can look right here, because I remember when downtown Silver Spring was not a nice place to go out at night. I also remember when they wanted to put the Mall of America there to solve all of our problems. We as a community fought a bad idea. We ended up with a successful one. But it's not all the way there. On a personal note, my fiance and I are scheduled to move in 2 months to the old Canada Dry building on East West Highway down the street. How can you say that we've had smart growth when we've sprawled up 29 and sprawled up New Hampshire for 20 years with an abandoned bottling factory a half block from a metro?
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
The other candidates on the dais tonight have spoken about things like the ICC, the Purple Line, smart growth. All of these things are important, but time and time again in the history of the last 30 years in Maryland, when the General Assembly has been confronted with a choice between making a paradigm shift to really manage these things and doing little bits and pieces that control a little bit but don't accomplish the overall objective, they've gone with the little bits. And I'm thinking again of the Critical Areas Act that was passed in 1980, the 1992 Planning Act, which followed on the Barnes Commission. The Barnes Commission recommended that we set state standards on the preservation of sensitive lands, and that we have the state enforce those standards, and all of that was rejected. In the 1992 Planning Act, the General Assembly decided that states would be allowed to specify what their sensitive areas were, what their development areas were, their rural areas, but they would set the standards for protection. They would develop the plans, and the Maryland Department of Planning would review them, but would not have the chance to alter them, amend them, or even reject them. Same thing in smart growth. We directed where state funding would go, but in some cases, development is so lucrative, they do not seek state funding. So we need to change that paradigm.
Thank you.
The ICC is an unimaginative, business-as-usual approach based on a 40-year-old plan that hasn't proven that it will actually reduce any congestion. Its $3 billion cost is about $166 million a mile, and it's siphoning money from other needed transit projects like the Purple Line that would actually contribute towards reducing traffic and sprawl. When people say, well, what can we do? Isn't it a done deal? I concede that at this point in time it is an uphill battle, but I always encourage everyone to have a little more Sammy Abbott and Takoma Park in them. The reason why we don't have 95 coming through Takoma Park right now is that this community knows how to stand up and fight against things, and I want to take a little more of Takoma Park into Silver Spring and the rest of District 20 to show people how to get things done.
Thank you. Would you like to follow up, Mr. Murray?
Yes, I would. Just as Delegate Hicks, and I have a 100% voting record as far as the environmental community is concerned as well. And I think that, again, relationships. Montgomery County does not exist in a vacuum. In order to get legislation passed in Annapolis, we have to work along with other communities, which means sometimes educating them, which I am prepared to do. I also have the relationships with individuals that we need to have on our side to push through legislation that will benefit them as well as Montgomery County.
Thank you.
We can have developers writing our environmental laws and having our agencies rubber stamp them. The planning board, although this is a county issue, the planning board in Clarksburg is an example of what happened there. Developers have huge lobbies in Annapolis, and the citizens need to have more of a say in what's going on. Also, as far as contacts in Annapolis, I think Sheila Hickson's the only one that's been in Annapolis longer than I have been as far as pounding the pavement and trying to get legislation through. I've been an advocate there for many, many years.
Would you like to follow up, Ms. Hickson?
Thank you, Diane. That's my follow-up. No, notice that the theme that's going through all your questions and all our answers is funding it. Unfortunately, we have to go back to that each time. But be careful what we're doing with our money, how we're getting it, and get our priorities straight. And then what we can do for education, we can do for the environment, we can do for transportation, we do for housing. But it is money. And because I'm on the Ways and Means Committee and chair it, no one likes us, but we've learned to live with it. But the tax issue is always bad, not a 4-letter word, but a bad 3-letter word.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker?
I would echo what Gareth said. I think all of us are strong environmentalists. There's 24 votes in Montgomery County. There's 71 it takes to pass a bill and 85 to override a veto if, God forbid, we get stuck with Bob Ehrlich for another 4 years. And we need to send somebody to Annapolis that can round up the votes in Howard County and Arundel County, from John Donahue in Hagerstown and Rudy Kane on the Eastern Shore, who's worked with those guys to cast hard votes in the past. And I know I can get them to cast good pro-environment votes in the future.
Thank you.
Well, to echo what a few folks have said, that's right. It's a regional issue, and a lot of the issues that we're debating here in Takoma Park are being discussed throughout the state. I've taken a tour with Mayor O'Malley of what Baltimore wants as their project, which is the Red Line. And the history of the state is frequently a camping Montgomery County versus Baltimore. It's a lot better if it's Montgomery and Prince George's County with Baltimore. I have the expertise to know where the federal money is buried to fund these types of projects, like the Red Line in Baltimore and the Purple Line in our community. If you can send me to Annapolis, I'm going to try and dig some of that money up and bring it back to District 20.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to point out with Senator Sarbanes' retirement that Congressman Cummings, who's on the Transportation Environment Committee, Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, is going to be the voice of transportation for our state in the future. Aaron might know where the money's buried, but I know where it's coming from in the future. I also wanted to point out that I actually have a record of accomplishment. I advised Senator Curry, who's the chairman of the Budget and Tax Committee. I advised Delegate Conway, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, on those restrictions on Garvey bonds. So if you want somebody who knows how to manage the money, who knows how to convince people to do hard things, and who can do the complicated research to prove the point, then I'm someone you would have sent to Annapolis. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mazier?
Not much to follow up on. I think that the one bit that I don't think I've heard up here yet related to sprawl that we need to get really tough on is getting tough on developers and requiring them to pay the impact fees necessary to give back to the communities so that we can address some of the issues that we've been talking about this round of questions.
Great. Thank you. I think it's a little hard for voters when all of you generally agree on the topics. And I'm turning to another topic that perhaps you generally agree on. So I'm going to ask you to try to be specific, if possible, to how you perhaps stand out from the other candidates. I see one of the biggest issues of this community, the issue of affordable housing. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Hucker, and ask you if you could define what affordable housing is. Do we have enough of it? And if not, how would you lead on that issue specifically?
I was supportive of the county's efforts to build more workforce housing is a good start. It doesn't provide enough affordable housing for people who are making less than county employees make. It might start at $25,000 or $30,000 a year. There's plenty of people in our community living below $20,000 a year that can't stand the increases in rents that we've seen all through Montgomery County. We need a much more aggressive approach. We need to make more incentives for developers to build affordable housing near metro stations. We need to make it much easier for nonprofits to take over existing buildings like the Canada Dry building that have been sitting there for years, not that that's a perfect example, and turn it into affordable housing near metro stations. And we need to make it much harder for landlords to convert existing affordable housing into condos. My building is hardly affordable, and I'm just learning that we're likely to be converted to condos. And that's happening to people who make a lot less all over this area. We need to make it much harder for landlords to convert.
Thank you. Mr. Klein?
I've worked on affordable housing issues for 5 years in the U.S. Senate, and we don't have enough affordable housing here. We define it pretty much based on issues dealing with folks who are at 30 or 40% of median income, and if you're that far down and you're lucky enough to get one of the units available, then you have affordable housing. If you're anybody who's not, there is no affordable housing available to you. We need to make a fundamental change. In 1972, Montgomery County was a national leader on affordable housing when we passed the MPDU set-aside program. That policy was excellent 30 years ago, but today it doesn't deal with the current situation. We need to have a new market. We need to have a new vision. As an economist, I'm very aware about the incentives and policies that need to be established and created to make the right projects move forward and to allow affordable housing to be available to everybody, workforce housing to the teachers, to the government employees that really form the backbone of this community that we all love and enjoy.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
A statistic that I think is really remarkable, and this is from the Maryland Department of Planning, between 2000 and 2003, the median price of a home in Montgomery County rose by 38%, and the median income rose by 5%, and that is basically the gap that we're trying to fill. I'm supporting several specific proposals. I'm supporting increased funding for the Maryland Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which is funded by the interest generated by title escrow companies. I'm supporting marrying the state programs to help first-time home buyers with our local realities. In other words, many of our state programs are centered on the median home price throughout our state rather than in the D.C. suburbs. And that means that in many cases, to qualify for the state loan assistance programs, you need to buy a house or have an income that is you need to buy a house that you can't find here. In other words, the housing price is too high for the D.C. suburbs, and you need to have an income that is too low to qualify for a house in our district. So I'd like to see us get those programs at the state level in line with the realities in the D.C. suburbs so they can benefit residents here.
Thank you. Ms. Mazier?
Fair market rent for a two-bedroom apartment in this area is around $1,200, and we have about 56% of our population in District 20 as a renter-based population. The median county income is $72,000, which means for every person that earns $120,000, there's a $24,000 wage earner. If you take a minimum wage earner, it would take them to live in that two-bedroom apartment, two people working minimum wage every single day for 365 days a year just to pay for that apartment, and they'd be spending 60% of their income on their housing. We need to address this problem in a variety of ways. We have to make sure that developers can't buy out of the MPDU process that Aaron made reference to. We need to promote tenant rights and condo conversions. We need to use surplus or underused state land for affordable housing. I think we need to create a state grant program to match local affordable housing trust funds. And creative financing options for first-time home buyers would be a step in the right direction as well.
Mr. Murray?
At some point, we have to stop doing things the way that we've always done them and expecting different results. I think we have to start building differently because there are methods where we can build cheaper, but of course regular developers aren't into building that way because they will not make the money that they're accustomed to making. So we have to look at alternative measures in terms of the construction industry itself. We also have to look at how we can protect individuals. Condo conversions may be great for those who own the apartment building, but it's not great for the individual who happens to be renting. I think we have to look at other mechanisms in terms of bringing those apartment building owners into the ownership of the building even, so that they are no longer just renting, but they're putting money back into a building that they own. I think we have to create an incentive for individuals to be willing to come in with affordable housing as well.
Thank you.
And that's Delegate Hickson's bailiwick in terms of the tax incentives.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon?
Developers of large projects should have to put more property aside for affordable housing. When buildings are converted from rent to condo, The occupant should be able to get a break in the price if they decide to buy into the condo. We need restrictions on going from rent to condo. And we also do have government programs out there, such as the property tax credit program for moderate income people, but nobody ever seems to know about them. The programs and the grants that are out there to help people need to be advertised. Right now, you'd have to be a tax expert to understand some of the programs that would give you tax credits if you knew about them. And we need to get the word out about what's already out there so that people that can take advantage of MPDU or HOC or tax credits for moderate income people, so those folks can take advantage of it.
Ms. Hickson.
Yes, we definitely have to strengthen the MPDU policy and continue it on and make it. In Montgomery County, it's working very well. The rest of the state, not particularly so. But we also passed a bill for property tax relief for people at a certain income who work for the county, and particularly for policemen and firemen. And those are some of the tax programs that Diane was discussing, and there are two, but those passed and they're going into effect. I also had a bill in on the condo conversion. To me, it's unconscionable when the people who have lived there all their lives, handicapped senior citizens, the bill gave an age limit, and for at least they could stay for 3 years. Handicapped could stay for 5 years. Another piece of it was that if you were going to convert this apartment, that the person who had lived there for a certain number of years you could not touch their apartment until that person died. No one else could have that apartment except that one person. We got close on the bill, but we lost it by 1 vote.
Okay. Thank you. Would any of you like to follow up on that question? Start with you, Mr. Hucker.
30 seconds. Aaron and Heather and Sheila and Diane, I believe, and Lucinda are all right that the MPDU program was a great idea that needs to be greatly expanded. You know, the other part of working on affordable housing is, as Heather's absolutely correct, strengthening tenant rights in this county, which are heavily regulated at the state level. Unfortunately, we've worked quite a bit to strengthen them in Montgomery County, but there's only so much you can do, and I'll be a strong advocate for tenants' rights at the state level. And we also obviously need to raise wages. We've had, you know, average wage in this country stuck at the same level for about 20 years, and we need to be doing everything we can to get people out of poverty and into the middle class so they can afford the housing that's available.
Thank you. Mr. Aaron?
Well, I think that's right. It's also really about what kind of community do we live in and do we want to live in. If everybody in this room's house was for sale, who here could afford to buy it? What would our community look like if only the people that could afford to buy our houses lived here? I came back to the community where I'm from because I love the diversity that Takoma Park, that District 20 has. And if we don't tackle this issue, we're going to lose that diversity, and we're going to lose one of the key elements that make us a special and wonderful place to be.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
Again, I come back to this issue of thinking comprehensively about issues. It's very important that we add an affordable housing component to our smart growth laws, and we need to bring affordable housing in near the transit centers. We need to concentrate development. The affordable housing shouldn't be far, far away in Clarksburg or Germantown or at the edge of our county. That just adds to the sprawl problems. So I want to make sure that we change, again, that paradigm and strengthen smart growth to incorporate affordable housing.
Thank you. Ms. Mazur?
I consider it a particular shame that our public service employees in this area can't afford to live in the communities in which they serve. Police officers on the Takoma Park City Police Department, by and large, do not live in Takoma Park. Our teachers, our firefighters, all of the people who are giving so much of themselves aren't earning enough. That's one side of the issue is their earning potential and where we should be supporting their salaries and benefits. Another is targeting some of the assistance for affordable housing to those communities. I do fear that we're seeing a changing shift in our own special Takoma Park that I mentioned earlier in the opening statement, the things that make us so unique and sometimes front page stories in the Washington Post. Some of that local flavor is going to change if you can't buy a house under $500,000 in this community.
Mr. Murray, would you like to follow up?
Yes. Back in the 60s, when I was in undergraduate school at the University of Maryland, Takoma Park was one of the few places that we felt we could visit and get back to the campus in one piece. And that was because of the diversity within Takoma Park. I think that we have to look at affordable housing, and affordable housing is one of those phrases that folks just toss around, but affordable means something that I can afford to buy. It's not a price that you just pull out of the sky, as we have done. And I think affordable housing needs to be in every community, not just in the inner cities of this particular county and around subway systems, but everyone needs to have affordable housing. Otherwise, we get back to that same old thing of not in my backyard. And I think we need diversity within this state.
Ms. Nixon?
For Montgomery County, District 20 probably has the most affordable housing in the county, other than maybe a few small areas of Wheaton. I can't afford to buy my house. I can't even afford to sell my house because I can't afford to buy another house. It's a real dilemma, although it looks like housing prices may be stabilizing as interest rates go up. One thing we could do is to get programs in for lower interest rates for moderate income people and expand those programs so more people would qualify.
Ms. Hicks, would you like to follow up?
Just a quick comment, sitting here listening, the thing that on affordable housing and for the people that we deal with, the senior citizens and the people in low-income areas, the thing we hear from them is fear. The gas tax are going up, the energy tax are going up, they can't have housing, cost of food. It's just a frightening thing. So I think our role as legislator is to be able to calm those fears, help those people with these programs. And everything that was suggested up here is absolutely correct. We should do those and expand the programs that are on the books and not forget how to take care of people. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love to stay another couple of hours, and we might start to get, make a dent in these questions. I would like to ask 2 more questions and then go to closing statements. So I realize some of you may be getting tired, and I'll understand if somebody needs to leave. But I'm wondering, all of you there seems to be universal agreement that a change in governorship would be a good idea.
That's right.
So starting with you, Mr. Klein, who are you supporting for governor this year and why?
That's a good question, Eric. I'm going to say that I'm supporting Aaron Klein for state delegate. I'm also the only candidate, the only other office at this point that I've taken a position is supporting our own Peter Francho for comptroller, because governor's one of 3 votes on the Board of Public Works, and we need to have a comptroller that's a real Democrat, and I think it would be wonderful to have one here from Takoma Park. Beyond that, I think whoever gets sent to work for District 20 down in Annapolis needs to have a good relationship with the next Democratic governor, and we need to make absolutely sure that whether it's Mayor O'Malley or County Executive Duncan, and working for Senator Sarbanes over the last 5 years, I've worked extensively with both Montgomery County and Baltimore, so I understand the issues, the policies, and have the personal connections to be effective as an advocate for our community. So very, very simply, I'm not at this point taking a stand between the 2 Democrats, but everybody in this room has to work to get rid of Ehrlich.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie?
I'm supporting a Democrat for governor. I haven't endorsed either candidate. I think they each bring strengths to the position, and I leave it, as I leave my own race, to the wisdom of the primary voters to decide who should be our candidate.
As a member of the Democratic National Committee, I'm technically officially prohibited from making public endorsements in primaries. But let me tell you what I did to make sure that we are going to have a Democrat in that office. In 2002, Democrats in this area became grossly disaffected by the campaign that was run here. That's how we got Ehrlich in place in the first place. In 2004, when I had the opportunity to run the Kerry Edwards campaign, I took it as a mission for 2006 for this state in re-energizing and mobilizing the Democratic base all across the state. I threw out the old playbooks that said that to win statewide, all you need to do is get high voter turnout in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Baltimore City. And instead, I placed our headquarters in Howard County, the center of the state, to make a play for that area that was trending Democratic. We had field organizers in every section of the state. We sponsored a drag car race in southern Maryland to get the message out that Democrats in the bingo parlors and the bowling alleys and the race car tracks and the union shops need to be reminded why they're Democrats, why their parents and grandparents were Democrats, and why they need to come back to the party and be engaged and vote. And if I could have my 30 seconds now. The way we win here in this state is by having a One Maryland strategy, and through that campaign we were the first to promote that and to successfully win that. We won that election by 13 percentage points. We won Howard County. We won back Baltimore County. We won Charles County in southern Maryland, where we sponsored the drag car race. We came within striking distance in two areas of the Eastern Shore where Democrats are typically low performers. That's how we're going to win this election in 2006, because we mobilized and energized people in 2004. I'm supporting a Democrat for governor, and I am very confident that we're going to win this election.
Mr. Murray?
One of the things you learn in Annapolis is that sometimes you have to take a stand, and sometimes you have to say things that folks may not like. I'm supporting Doug Duncan for governor. There is no one who is perfect. I'm from Baltimore. When I visit Baltimore City and I look at what goes on in Baltimore, when I talk to my friends who are legislators from Baltimore, and I hear the horror stories in terms of the school system, when I hear the horror stories in terms of crime, when I look at the drug addiction within the city, maybe they have signs up saying, believe, well, you believe this. You do not change your environment by accident. It has to be intentional. You have to plan. You look at downtown Silver Spring. We could give away property at one point. It takes vision. It takes managerial expertise. You have to be able to bring in the talent that you need. And I'll take my 30 seconds if I can.
Ask you that? I'm sorry.
You have to bring in the talent that you need in order to make things fly. Doug Duncan is not perfect, but I think in terms of the governor that we need to lead this state, a visionary, Doug Duncan is the man that I'm supporting, and I am not ashamed to say so.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon?
I have been very unhappy with the development in Montgomery County in the last 8 years. The Clarksburg issue with the planning board rubber stamping developers' letters has really upset me. The push for the ICC has upset me. And I finally found a question that I think I can differentiate myself from the other candidates. I'm voting for Martin O'Malley.
Thank you. Ms. Dixon?
Well, at this time, I have not endorsed a candidate for governor. I know what I don't want. I don't want Governor Ehrlich back. And both candidates are running for governor on the Democratic ticket, are highly qualified, and I'll be thrilled to have either one of them down there. I've worked with both gentlemen. They're both good in their own right, and we'll let the voters make that choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker?
Bob Ehrlich doesn't like me. We've repeatedly put together broad-based coalitions of civil rights groups and unions and community groups to pass groundbreaking legislation, put it on his desk where he doesn't want it, and he vetoes it, and we have to override his vetoes. I would happily take either one of these nominees, but let me say something else. Bob Ehrlich should have never been in office. Bob Ehrlich won because we sent forth a Democratic nominee that was afraid to act like a Democrat, who played to the middle, who took the base for granted. If she had picked up my friend Ike Leggett as lieutenant governor, they'd both be in the governor's mansion right now. I don't want to offend anybody who worked on that campaign, but we can't tolerate more Democratic nominees like that. And I've spent my career fighting a lot of Republicans and holding a lot of Democrats accountable. And I'm proud my organization, Progressive Maryland, asked both of these nominees hard questions, and they're available, their answers are available online for every, not just Progressive Maryland members, but every voter in the state to see. So whoever goes in the governor's mansion, we can hold them accountable to positions in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Klein? Oh, right. We started with you. Now, some of you took 30 seconds. Right. Anybody who didn't get 30 seconds who'd like to add anything?
Yeah, I was real quick this time.
Okay.
I do want to add that after the primary, whatever Democrat is elected, I will go out and I will work for. I have known Bob Ehrlich since he was on the Judiciary Committee in the General Assembly a long time ago, and he's always been a nice guy, and I've always disagreed with his votes way back then when he was in Congress and as governor, and I certainly would work to see him defeated no matter who gets the nomination as the Democrat.
Thank you. For my final question, in a way going back to where we started, I'm sure that you're all qualified, well-intentioned progressive candidates. What qualifications or skills do you think set you apart from the others? We'll start with you, Ms. Leslie.
Well, I worked in the General Assembly. We've discussed that, and I know Maryland's budget. I know the policy processes. I know the players, including the people in the Senate, the committee chair, men and women, and I believe that I spoke about this earlier, motivation would enable me to take my knowledge of the system and put it to work for our priorities. I want to say that throughout the Ehrlich administration, the General Assembly, in my opinion, has failed to use the measures available to it to affect its priorities. It is a relatively weak assembly compared to others in the nation. It doesn't get to add to the budget. It only gets to subtract. But there are lots of things that it could have done within the budget that it did not do. And I think my knowledge of those mechanisms would be invaluable, particularly if, unfortunately, we are burdened with Ehrlich for another 4 years. In addition, I have experience representing Maryland's interests at the federal level through my work with Congressman Cummings. So I think I bring unique perspectives and experience that would make me an effective delegate.
Thank you. Ms. Bazir?
I'm also someone who has worked at the national level. I've worked in Congress for the better part of the last 13 years of my professional career, and I understand policy and building winning coalitions and how government works. But it's really, I think, important to understand the local community and to have had experience serving the local community. On the city council, providing wins on issues like getting our trash cans put back in the parks, like fighting for a paper ballot in the last municipal election, like having wind energy tax credits, mediating neighborhood disputes, working on public safety and traffic calming issues, but not just for Takoma Park. I'm on the board of directors for the Long Branch Athletic Association, an after-school program, and have worked strongly in the Long Branch region of the district. As with my work on the Latino Health Initiative for the county, I've worked throughout the county and in parts of Silver Spring to impact issues in that community as well. My local roots, my proven record of success here at the local level, combined with my knowledge of policy, how to get things done at the government level, and the relationships that I've built running statewide campaigns and being elected statewide as a Democratic National Committee woman will come to bear for our community in District 20.
Mr. Murray?
I think the one thing that sets me apart from everyone else up here, you can see, that Takoma Park, has been a special place in terms of its diversity. And my slogan during my campaign was a voice for the entire community. And I think I bring a different perspective because my life has been different. There have been things that I had to go through that maybe some folks up here had to go through, but when I was growing up, there were places that I could not go to because I'm black. And so my strategy in terms of building coalitions, in terms of attacking problems, tends to be a little different because my life experience has been different. There are certain things that I feel that I bring to the table in terms of being able to understand where folks are coming from because I've been there, in terms of being able to fight for human rights because I've been there, being able to understand what it's like to be denied certain rights because I've been there, being able to think outside of the square because in order to get to where I am, I had to think outside of the square. So I think I bring a different perspective to the table.
Thank you. Ms. Nixon?
Yes, when I said that Sheila Hickson and I had been in Annapolis the longest, I was saying that in a nice way because Sheila is my favorite person, and she's a wonderful legislator. But I have been in Annapolis since the 80s as a citizen lobbyist. I've been down there without a salary, without benefits, without health care for my time there. And if you think it's difficult to get the minimum wage through, try to talk to somebody from the Eastern Shore and tell them that they should make animal cruelty a felony. And we got that through. I have worked with Republicans. I have worked with Democrats. My husband and I have pounded the pavement. We've been very fortunate that we have been able to get into offices that other people can't get into because we're so passionate about the issues about animals, the environment, and health care that are so important to us.
Ms. Hickson?
Yes, thank you. Well, I would like to go back again to the Maryland General Assembly, and I think I make a difference. I think I've represented the community well, and in the years that I've been in, I believe that I listen, and I think that, and when I listen, I take action, as the many people who know me is right. But the other piece, and in politics, is power. And what I do have, I'm the third highest ranking person in the House of Delegates. In fact, many people say I'm first because I'm the only woman, and I never disagree with that. Okay, it's and I'm chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and if anything happens to the Speaker of the House, I'm in line to take over. So I really have to go back, you know. I believe, and also, unfortunately, John Herson, who was a chairman, left to go to another. He went out to make money. I can, you know, and so that's what can I say. So I'm the only one in top leadership, though, and we do have Kumar Barve as the majority leader. But Montgomery County, I believe, needs me back in the leadership role in the state of Maryland, and I would love to have you send me back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hucker?
This is a progressive and activist district. I've been a progressive activist all my life. And I think it may be because of that that it's frustrating to me to go to Annapolis for the last 4 years every day and see a 2/3 Democratic majority that has had such a hard time historically raising the minimum wage or passing a living wage bill or enacting strong environmental protections or requiring health care coverage from Walmart. Those should be pages 1, 2, 3, and 4 of the Democratic playbook. But we've had to assemble the majorities for those bills over a lot of opposition from our friends in the Democratic majority. I've spent 4 years developing the relationships and building the experience to get those hard bills out of committee. And I have the track record of success in Annapolis to make sure that the bills that are the most important to Silver Spring and Takoma Park don't die in committee like the 3/4 of bills that do, but come to the floor and produce real laws for real benefits for real people sitting in this room and outside this room. You don't have to believe me today. You can look at the Sun and the Gazette and even some columnists from The Voice who have been crazy enough to recognize my work. Thank you.
Eric, I want to thank you for the question and thank everybody here who's still here, and you've learned a lot, and there are a lot of wonderful folks up here on the panel, and I don't envy your decision to pick 3. But I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm the only candidate here who went through our school system, Montgomery County Public Schools K-12, and our schools, Takoma Park Middle and Blair High School. I've been dedicated and fighting for that, starting at the Better Blair movement. I'm still involved today, working on establishing the Blair Education Foundation so we can bring in the largest alumni network in the county, of any school in the county, back to support our local schools so we don't have to be funding them through vending machines and other ways that are more harmful to students. In addition to these long local routes, I've also set upon my life as a mission of service for the community. For the last 5 years, I've worked for Senator Sarbanes, serving all the people of Maryland and especially our community. I've developed a special expertise in mass transit, which is a top priority.
Aaron, you know, I was going to give you your 30 seconds as for closing statements, so how would you like to just go right into that right now?
Thank you, Eric. Okay. For a special expertise for the Purple Line. And I'll close with why the Purple Line is so personally important to me. My sister's a single working mom in Silver Spring. My nephew's 9. He goes to Sligo Creek Elementary, which is in the same building where I went to high school in Blair. My niece is 4. They're in daycare after school. When my sister was working downtown and she'd get jammed by her boss at 5:30, she could call our mom, who lived in Bethesda, 7 miles away, and say, can you pick the kids up from daycare, because if you don't get there by 6, it's $25 per head, and I don't have $50 to spare this month. Our mom would love to do it. Loving grandmother's retired.
Thanks.
She can't get from Bethesda to Silver Spring 7 miles in 30 minutes. It's wrong. We need to do something about it, and we need somebody who's caring and committed to be a voice for people in this community that can't go to these meetings tonight because they're at home with their families.
Thank you. Ms. Leslie, would you like to give us your closing statement? 30 seconds.
You've heard about the qualifications of each of us and our experience with government, in particular, in my case, my experience in Annapolis. But I want to return to the earlier point I made, which is about motivation. My experience in life, I actually was born in Kentucky and grew up there until I was 10. I went to Washington University on a scholarship, and I think that we need somebody who's focused on the individual and providing the government that will help each person be the best that they can be, fulfill the destiny, the opportunities, and the gifts that they have, and that's the kind of legislator I want to be.
Thank you. Ms. Mazier?
Mari, Seth, Lynn, Tom, Karen, John, Rebecca, Jonathan, Jamie, Jim, Emily, Nina, Mike, Robert, Caleb, Pat, Marcy, Mary, George, Terry, Joyce, Clyde, Mary, Bruce, Rick, Kathy, Kent, Mike. That's my group. That doesn't count. Mary, Catherine.
Time.
I know you. I've worked with you. You know that I can deliver for you. I want to be your voice. Continue the conversation. Send me to Annapolis. We'll keep getting things done for this local community.
Mr. Murray?
My third. Yes. I think I provide the reality of Montgomery County for those who live outside of Montgomery County. During the past 4 years, I've managed to strengthen the relationship between those in Prince George's and Baltimore City and Baltimore County, Howard County, because I present a different face to the General Assembly and erode the stereotype of folks have for Montgomery County. And so I think that I need to return to continue the work. If you look at my voting record, you'll see that I have a 100% voting record with education, 100% voting record with the environmentalists, and also some significant legislation as far as health care and business is concerned.
I'm not running for the House of Delegates because I want to someday run for Congress or for the Senate or for president. I'm running because I care about our community, because I think consumers get ripped off too much and there could be laws out there that can help them. I want our legislators to do for me what I want to do for everybody, to have an open door all the time, to represent your interests instead of just how I think it should be. I want to be there for you and for the community, and I want to be your advocate in Annapolis.
Thank you.
Well, I want to go back again for the reasons I said before, too, but most of all, I want to go back to represent people. I'm a former Head Start teacher. I want to take care of the community. I know many of you, not by name, but individually. Good line, Heather. And you did, but I feel I've served you well, and I hope you feel the same way. But I will be your voice of understanding, compassion, and I have an ability to get things done. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you believe that it takes more than $5.50 an hour to raise a family, especially in this community, and you're glad we raised the minimum wage, if you're sick of paying tax dollars to contractors that create more poverty in our community, and you're glad we passed a living wage law, if you believe the largest corporations in our state can afford to pay some income tax just like you and me to support the environment, to support our schools and our transit, and if you believe Walmart should be providing health care for their employees, then you should join me in this campaign to represent you and your progressive values inside the House of Delegates and get more reforms like that done. By supporting me, you'll be joining the Teachers Union, the local AFL-CIO, the Police Union for Takoma Park, the Police Union for Montgomery County, the firefighters, the Asian Pacific American Democrats, and Bob Bingham, the National Field Director of the Sierra Club.
Thank you.
I've delivered those reforms in the past. I'll deliver more in the future with your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Very quickly, before we go, I'd like to make a few announcements. We have voter registration on the table. Excuse me? Register to vote. We have voter registration. On Thursday. On June 22nd, Thursday, June 22nd, we will be holding another forum for District 5 Montgomery County Council. We'll be speaking with Valerie Irvin and Hans Reamer, candidates for that seat. July 20th, Thursday, July 20th, we'll be talking to Senate candidates for District 20. So that'll be a very interesting evening. Ida Rubin and Jamie Raskin. We're still trying to nail down times for an at-large forum and a Board of Education forum, and we will keep you posted. On behalf of Takoma Park, I want to thank all of you for your desire to serve us. If you are elected, we will not forget you, and you be prepared to hear, get feedback from us. And thank you very much for coming out tonight, and thank all of you.
Thank you all.